We're going to call this hearing to order. This is a hearing for an appeal of HRB COA 1685 Newcomb Oil LLC, 118 Stephen Foster Avenue. And I'm going to be acting as hearing officer, Tim Butler, city attorney, for those of you all who do not know me. Here's the way we're going to proceed tonight so that you all are aware. First, we're going to let the applicant appellant, which would be Newcomb Oil, to present their information. We're going to give them 30 minutes to do so. Excuse me, my voice broke. I'm going through puberty again, I guess. 30 minutes to do so. Then we're going to let the preservation director, Rashay Jennings, along with those opposed to the application to demolish the building that we're referring to, they're going to have 30 minutes. At the end of that time, each party by their representative in turn, which would be Jim Willett. I think, Jim, you're okay. I'm giving you great authority without even that. And Rashay will have 5 minutes to basically summarize and rebut any information, and we'll go again with Jim first and then Rashay. We're going to be generally following the rules of evidence, but as with all KRS 100 or zoning matters, strict rules of evidence do not apply. If anyone strays in terms of relevance, I'm going to be reining them back in. Questions should be directed to the hearing officer. We're not going to allow direct cross-examination. If you have a question, you should direct it to me, and then I'm going to reserve the right to ask it at the end of the presentations or to interrupt if I feel like that's the best way to keep things on track. And then in terms of for the council's benefit, you all can deliberate tonight and make a decision, or you can, if there's a lot of information, which I would anticipate there would be, and you want to consider that information, you can defer the matter, postpone the matter to your next agenda at the close. But remember that at the close of the public hearing, the time for public comment is finished. I would advise you, until you all have made a decision, please don't, go out. Number one, fact finding on your own. Number two, asking people questions or allowing people to bend your ear about it. Be strict but polite. If someone comes up to you croak and says, "Hey, I want to talk to you about that," just say, "Well, I'll be glad to talk to you about it after we've made our decision." So with that, if everybody's ready to go, Jim, I'll turn it over to you. And just so that you know, the 30 minutes, if there are questions, we're not going to count those questions against your time. And council members, if you don't have a question, don't worry about asking me. If the council has a question, please address them directly. Jim, you go ahead.
Organized here. Good evening, and thank you. My name is Jim Willett. I'm with the law firm of Saltzman Willett, representing this evening the appellant Newcomb Oil Company LLC and its subsidiary Newcomb Realty. I'm accompanied this evening by two officials from the company, Bill Newcomb and my far left, and Daniel Newcomb, my immediate left. Also present tonight are two of the professionals that have participated in the preparation of the financial analysis and the information that we've provided. The first is Michael Saltzman, who's a registered professional engineer with VCD Inc., and also Jerry James, who's with Goldmark Realtors. Those guys are here to provide any information that I may not be able to, or to kick me if I misstate anything that might be appropriate. In the interest of brevity, I'm going to speak for all of those people here tonight. but they are available if there are questions that I can't answer. First, I'd like to thank you all for your time. I know this is a special meeting and something that's not normally on your agenda. I'm also appreciative of the work that's been done by the Historical Review Board and particularly Rashay Jennings. The fact that we're appealing an action on their part does not detract from our respect for the work that they do and the process, even though our presentation tonight is premised upon that action not being entirely correct. So, with that having been said, I assume you all are all familiar with Newcomb Oil. I think it's fair to say that they're a valued corporate citizen of Bardstown and Nelson County. That company has always been supportive of the community, community affairs. I think it's fair to say that it also appreciates the values and the historic aspect of this community, and also supports the efforts of the Historical Review Board. However, in this particular case and the project that they've proposed, we suggest that demolition of the facility in question is justified under applicable law. Very briefly, the project that this particular application involves consists of 3 different applications for certificates of appropriateness. 2 were approved both by the Historic Review Board and the City Council. Those were the permission to demolish the existing convenience store at the corner of East Stephen Foster and 2nd Street, Five-Star location. And also conditionally approved was a proposal to build a new convenience store at that site. The third component of this project, and a significant one, is the one that's before you tonight, and that is the demolition of the house commonly referred to as the Dobbs House at 118 East Stephen Foster Avenue. Although those were 3 separate applications, they relate to one and the same project. The existing store at that location was built originally in 1988. Although it's been well maintained, approaching 30 years in age, it's become somewhat outdated and functionally inefficient. That is from both a business perspective and also from a consumer perspective. In addition to serving the community, that location is very commonly frequented by visitors and tourists to this community. So I think it's important both for the company and for the community for that facility to be up to Newcomb Oil standards and be a credit to the community as opposed to anything else. The new building proposed will be much more efficient in terms of operation, energy efficiency, lighting, insulation, heating and air, much better consumer experience. Newcomb Oil has embarked on a wide-ranging upgrade to facilities, not only in this community, but throughout the state for its other stores. But Bardstown being its home base and where they all live, this particular store is probably the most prominent in the community's eyes and in their desire to present their operation. That store is seriously underperforming when compared to other facilities that Newcomb Oil has been allowed to replace. However, the replacement of that store really cannot be justified without the third component, which we're here for you tonight, on the demolition of the 118 Stephen Foster property. As I believe you probably have, we've reviewed the work and reports generated by the Historic Review Board and its director. We don't have a lot to fault from that. I mean, this is obviously a property of the requisite age of 50 years, so that it does technically qualify as a historic property. However, other than its age and the fact that I recognize they take the position that it's a good example of what is referred to as American craftsman style construction, it is not unique either in this community or anywhere else. I mean, there are dozens of other examples of that style of construction within this community, on 6th Street, on 4th Street, on Parkview Drive, Loretta Road, and I think that they will acknowledge that. In addition, I would suggest that it really detracts from the two older buildings that are immediately adjacent to it. I mean, from its original construction, it would have looked out of place, and I think it still does today. But with respect to the work by the Historic Review Board, we contend that it does not address a key question and the basis for Newcomb Oil's application, and that is economic hardship. Under applicable law and the ordinances that we're dealing with, it is recognized that under circumstances where you're dealing with what should be an income-producing property, economic hardship is a valid grounds for a request and approval of demolition. And you'll note on the cover page of the informational packet I've provided, we identify the standard for your review of this action. When this type of action is submitted, the City Council and the HRB are to study the position of question of economic hardship. The test for economic hardship is not whether demolition provides a better use or return, but whether denial of that request to demolish deprives the owner of any reasonable return in the case of an income-producing property. And that applies whether the property is historic or not. And for tonight's purposes, we'll concede that it is. One other important point for your consideration, that economic hardship is not determined by the owner's financial circumstances. The focus is on the structure and whether it can produce a reasonable return on an investment. I guess kind of from a big picture perspective, obviously we have our application contends, and the information packet that you've been provided establishes that in spite of significant efforts by Newcomb Oil, basically since they acquired the property in 1998, they've not been able to identify any use for that, whether it involves improvements or not, that provides any reasonable return on the investment. Basically, I'd like to turn now to the information packet that you've been provided. As indicated, it includes the standard of review that you're bound to by law. I've also included at the bottom of that first page what we consider to be the appropriate motion for the City Council to adopt at the conclusion of these proceedings. I don't intend to take you through a word-by-word review of everything in this packet, but I would like to go over the highlights and leave more time for questions as opposed to boring you guys to death with me droning on ad nauseum. The second through 6 pages of this packet includes basically a checklist that is incorporated within the local ordinances and also within the review manual that Historic Review Board has developed. So this is their checklist. We've just gone through and tried to identify an appropriate response for each of the questions included within that. Briefly, I think tab 1 includes or is a copy of the property valuation assessment for the property. The property is still presently assessed at its original acquisition cost of $137,500, and I think that is reflective of the inability of the owner to identify productive use. Historically, Newcomb Oil has rented the property at different times in the past for residential purposes. That really was not sufficient to generate income to pay the expenses associated with the property, nor was that use really compatible with the adjoining convenience store use and public facility. Moving on, tab 2 is simply the deeds for the property. All of this packet and the information in this packet ultimately leads to a financial analysis that appears here at tab 7. So this information is eventually going to be plugged into that analysis. So we have the current tax bills for the property at tab 3. Tab 4 is, as requested by the checklist, an identification of the costs associated with demolition of the house on the property. That's been generated by DCD Inc. and Mr. Saltzman as involving approximately $19,800. Next is the assessment required by the checklist of either a licensed engineer or an architect as to the current condition of the structure. This particular letter was prepared back in 2010 with a prior application related to the property. The property has not changed since that point in time, other than a tree fell across the electric line serving the property. So the property has not had electric service for some time since that occurrence. So that analysis remains valid as of today. Tab 6 is a proposal by DCD identifying the scope of work associated with renovating the property. The analysis that is at tab 7 first takes you through the economics of operating the property with minimal improvements, basically for residential purposes. I think that clearly establishes that residential use does not present any reasonable return. In fact, it's a negative return. So the proposal for renovation costs by BCD does involve significant costs. These work items identified are required to bring the property to adequate standards for commercial use and to address liability concerns that Newcomb Oil has to address with all of its properties. So all told, those renovation costs, which by the way include asbestos abatement for the property, and also bringing the property up to appropriate code. The systems, notably the electrical, does not currently meet code and presents a danger to any potential use for the property. It also includes making the property compliant with ADA requirements or Americans with Disabilities Act. And then I already referred to tab 7. Tab 8 is a letter from Mr. James of Goldmark Realtors. It includes an analysis of the potential rental for the property. Without leasehold improvements, comparable properties would generate approximately $3 per square foot. And we're talking about a building that really, the first floor is the only one that would be usable for anything other than residential use. It's roughly 1,364 square feet. He also identifies rental rates appropriate after the $145,000 in anticipated leasehold improvements have been incurred. That range between $9 a square foot to $11 per square foot. And those are based on available comps within the historic downtown Clarkstown area. And I skipped that just because turning our attention now to tab 7 and the analysis there. Just to orient you, there are 3 sheets which include the 3 financial scenarios that we've gone through in some detail. The checklist asks for an analysis of the property and its income potential, specifically requiring identification of what's called internal rate of return, which is a financial equation intended to judge the economic viability of the property for any type of proposed use. And we would contend that that is exactly what the standard of review that you're required to go through dictates. The first sheet is based on minimal upgrades to the property, estimated at $25,000. That's basically restoration of the services and systems required to operate it as a residential use property. It includes the rental income that is indicated by Mr. James' analysis. Without walking you through all of the detail, it does include anticipated costs, both real estate taxes, maintenance, insurance, administrative expenses, and the like. But the bottom line is that going through that analysis indicates, as you can see on the bottom, an internal rate of return of negative 4.2%, which obviously is a losing proposition in terms of providing any reasonable economic return on the property. And speaking about all 3 of these analyses, I will say that I think that we've used very conservative numbers, both in terms of required rate of return. We've included at 10%, which is, in all honesty, far below what any reasonable business entity would be looking at. But again, wanting to be conservative in that regard, and also in terms of the anticipated taxes, operating expenses, and the like. So even with that conservative bent to our analysis, it doesn't show this as being a productive property without significant leasehold improvements that would elevate it to higher rental rates that are indicated.
Jim, so this analysis includes the sunk cost of the purchase price?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. It does not include, one other point of just to emphasize the conservative nature of this analysis. It does not include any debt service, but as is appropriate with the calculations of internal rate of return, it obviously includes whatever costs you have to advance for a particular proposed use. Excuse me. The second sheet there is an analysis based on the leasehold improvements suggested by BCD's proposal having been installed. It uses also the $9 per square foot rental rate, which is at, I guess, the lower range of the real estate company's analysis. But I would have to say we think is more appropriate for a property of that type, given its limitations in terms of absence of off-street parking, the constraints of the facility itself, and its proximity to a very active commercial use that is a convenience store operation. So based on the improvements being incorporated into the property, also taking full advantage of the preservation tax credits that are available, arguably, and I won't go into any great detail on that, both at the federal level, if these expenses are properly qualified, there's a 20% tax credit available at the federal level. And we've taken full advantage of that. Also, the same 20% is available for commercial properties on the state taxation level. But in all honesty, that is never what you get. I think based on most recent information available through the state historic review, historic agencies, generally tax credits at the state level were subjected to a $5 million cap statewide. And if you go over that cap, then they're all apportioned. So most recent history suggests that rather than the full 20%, you're going to get a little bit less than half of that.
Jim, that's the bump up in cash flow in year 2?
That's correct. We're anticipating construction year 1, recovery of those costs from a tax perspective in year 2.
Okay.
And I would also point out, because I'm kind of anticipating the next question, this also anticipates recovery of the full cost at the end of year 10, when, in all honesty, there's not any intent to sell the property or flip it or anything of that nature. So again, using the same operating expenses, even though I think it would be reasonable that with a commercial use they would be increased. But again, wanting to take a conservative view of this, same operating expenses and taxes, taking advantage of the available tax credits. The bottom line, as you'll see there for internal rate of return, is still a negative 4.0%. So even after spending, in this instance, over $145,000, there does not, and taking the available rental rates for downtown area, it still does not generate any positive return for that type of proposed use. And that use would apply whether it would be for professional office space, commercial use, residential. Really the only proposal that they've had in recent times have been for storage. So all of those uses, we've tried to factor it in to this and think that that $9 rate is probably the most realistic of all. Turning next to the third page of that analysis, we have looked at it from the perspective of best case scenario under the economic information provided by Mr. James and Goldmark Realtors. If we were able to generate $11 a square foot, this page goes through that same analysis, same conservative approach, but it's still, bottom line, comes up as a negative return on the investment that would be required to generate that.
You got about 5 more minutes.
Okay, I figured I was getting close. So that's the basis on which we think the City Council is required to consider this application. I guess in conclusion, I would just like to point out that aside from the fact that Newcomb Oil has expended considerable effort to find a productive use of property, and in spite of the fact that it's basically been an expense burden without any return over a significant period of time, and in spite of their efforts to identify other proposed uses, I think the economic analysis is eye-opening and accurate in terms of describing the economic realities of that property and its location. In contrast to that, the project that's proposed, I want to back up a little bit. Part of Mr. James' analysis at tab 8, it's his professional opinion that demolition of that house will not negatively impact the property values for the area, which is one of the components required for us to look at. And in fact, it's his opinion that it would be an enhancement to that area. And along those lines, in conclusion, I would just state that Newcomb Oil, while respectful of the history, believes that this specific property and with the economic realities is appropriate, and further that the overall project that this is a key component of will be a significant enhancement to that, what I would consider a gateway to that side of the city and the downtown historic district. They're talking about a very significant expense, well in excess of $1 million. They welcome the comments of the Historic Review Board and the City Council as how to best make that improvement compatible with the city, the history that we all value, and the overall historic and attractive aspects of the city, and believe that it will become an asset to the community as opposed to anything of a negative aspect. So with that, I'll take questions or turn it over to the appellees.
Jim, I had a couple of questions. The checklist you're using, where did that come for the benefit of the council? Where did that come from?
It was provided by a Historic Review Board, I believe.
It's in the guidelines, the historic guidelines. It's a whole page.
Yeah, I just wanted the council to know that it wasn't just, you didn't just make it up out of whole
You
cloth.
didn't just make it up.
Yeah, and it wasn't their checklist.
No, it's,
Okay. And then the other, and this is more for me, the standard of review,
That's,
where's that, what's the,
it's in that same.
it's in the same, this chapter 8 is a economic hardship exemption. It covers all the things Jim just spoke about. The checklist and the review.
And Ms. Jennings could probably speak more directly to that, but my understanding is that it has its origins in both our local ordinances, our review manual, and also the national standards under which they operate.
okay, thank you. Anybody, any of the council have any questions?
Has the house been tested for asbestos?
It has, and there is presence of asbestos that would have to be addressed under any use,
Under what?
under any proposed use, residential or commercial.
If nobody else has anything, we'll let the HRB.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And Rashay, as you come up and get ready, so we're not using any of your time, come on up and if you don't mind, if you would identify the persons that are involved in your presentation and who will be speaking, and if there are others that are not involved with the HRB who are wanting to say something that will not be covered by Ms. Jennings' presentation, if you would identify yourself. Is there somebody here that's not, is there somebody here that might speak that you're not, it's not been somebody you've dealt with or incorporated in your presentation?
Mr. Penn Bogart, Mr. David Hall, Ms. Dixie Hibbs will be speaking on my behalf, but on the HRB's behalf, but I don't know who else might be.
Is there anybody else here that would want to speak in opposition to this other than the people she just mentioned? If you do, raise your hand. Okay, go ahead. We're ready whenever you are.
Can I just interrupt? So her presentation will include the other
Yes.
three as well? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
And we're going to give you a 5-minute warning.
Great, thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. I kind of want to start off tonight in the fact that a lot of people don't really understand that the HRB rules and regulations are moderated by the state and the National Park Service, meaning the federal government. So this is for us to receive federal funding for the entire community and for our HRB district. So my job is to help everyone in the community, to help you achieve your goals, to help you be successful in every way that I possibly can. But while doing that, we have rules we have to follow too. And it's my job to help you, but it's my job to follow those rules. Okay? So what's the number one thing that Frankfort and the National Park Service really don't like to do? They do not want any of their properties on the National Register of Historic Places to be demolished. And every time a demolition occurs, I immediately have to report that to Frankfort, and then it goes to the National Park Service. It's a big deal. So I'm here to kind of explain to you why we want 118 East Stephen Foster to stay. Why? Because it's an important part of the story of Bardstown. So first off, I kind of want to get started by telling you what it takes to get on the National Register of Historic Places. This designation is a federal designation. It has to be approved at the state level, and then it goes to DC. There, a commission of experts review every aspect of that structure. They take its history, its significance, its architectural features, and they vote to accept or deny it for this list. The house in question tonight went through that process, and it passed. It's the same process that approved the Talbot Tavern. It's the same process that approved Spalding Hall. I need you to please look at Exhibit J. This house is so important that the executive director and the state historic preservation officer in Frankfort urges you to uphold our decision not to demolish this house.
Mr. Hearing Officer, may I interpose an objection at this point? Unless there's someone here to testify on their behalf. I mean, she's talking about witnesses that are not here and available.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we'll allow in over the objection, because it strict rules of evidence, it would be hearsay, but strict rules of evidence don't apply. And by the way, and you stopped.
I did.
Yeah, thank you. Just so that the council is aware that you can weigh, and I'm going to summarize what Jim's objection here is, that there's something that's been submitted here, and if Jim wanted to ask questions of the person who wrote the letter, he couldn't do it, and it puts him at a disadvantage. You can weigh the evidence. With that in mind, you can weigh this as evidence. You can give it more weight or less weight as you see fit, based on that fact. So again, in a court, the person that would be a court of law, a person that would be writing this letter would have to be here to say, this is my letter. Again, you don't have to follow those strict rules of evidence, but again, understanding that disadvantage that it puts them at, you can weigh this as you see fit and understand. And as part of it, I'm sure you've seen this letter, Jim. I assume you've seen this letter.
It was handed to me as we walked in, so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're going to have at the end of this, you'll have your rebuttal time. You may want to address that, but anyway, now with that in mind, keep going.
So this is from the executive director and the state historic preservation officer, who is urging us not to allow the demolition to occur. And if you look at Exhibit N, you're also going to see another letter from Marty Perry, who is the National Register Coordinator in Frankfort. And he's advising you not to allow this demolition to occur. He explained to me that if we demolish the structure, we have very few houses left on that street. We are seriously jeopardizing the entire street remaining on the National Register. He states, and I quote, "Demolishing the Dobbs house for the purpose of expanding the footprint of the gas station next door undermines several qualities that make Bardstown great. The National Trust for Preservation also cites many reasons why you should not demolish, but my favorite is that regret only goes one way. Once it happens, you can never get it back. So let's kind of continue on this story of the start of Bardstown and the Dobbs house. Please look at Exhibit E. This is the story the house tells. It's a story of a man named Cordell W. Dobbs and his wife Ophelia Dobbs, who operated a family shoe store in our town. The business was on North 3rd Street. The photograph was taken in 1954. He built a house here, he raised his family here, and that house was the Dobbs house. I know the house doesn't seem that large or too fancy, but I'm here to tell you tonight why it is so important. Please look at Exhibit H. You see Primitive Crow built in 1800, you see the 2-story brick built in 1809, and you see the Dobbs house built in 1939. This house tells the story of our town. It shows how the architecture changed, how it evolved. This entire streetscape tells the story of our town through time. This street is an example of how our town evolved from the early 1800s to the mid-1930s. This house is a part of our story of our community. If you look at Exhibit I, this is a 1951 Sanborn map. It's an application for 118 East Stephen Foster. There was a business there at one time. This demonstrates the building could potentially be used for business purpose, and it actually, in fact, has been used for that very purpose. I have a difficult time understanding economic hardship within our community. We have a lot of really successful things that are going on downtown. Almost every property downtown is occupied and successful. Airbnbs are being filled in Bardstown at rates that are not ever known to us. We are really thriving. I feel that there are a number of potential uses for this property, and I've seen many worse structures be rehabilitated and become income-producing properties. If you look at Exhibit I, you're going to see that 3 structures were either demolished and or removed in order to make the current gas station. Are you potentially going to make that 4? I mean, where do we stop and where do we draw the line? And I'm asking you to stop now. Why did HRB deny this particular demolition? There are many reasons. It will adversely cause damage to the integrity and character of the historic district. It will adversely affect the district's importance as a unified entity. Think of that whole street and that story through time that I'm trying to tell you. You can look at the entire application, COA 16-85, but more importantly, I want you to look at Exhibit A, which is denial during the HRB meeting that states exactly why this demolition was denied. Buying any property in the historic district comes with regulations, federal regulations that we are obligated to obtain. The lots are relatively small, and when you purchase property in the historic district, you have to accommodate that size to your business. You can't tear down business and buildings in the historic district because you want larger space to build larger things. That isn't how this works. That's not justification to tear down any building in our district, let alone one that's on the National Register of Historic Places. If you allow this to happen, you are setting a very dangerous precedent. If you allow this to happen, you are potentially and seriously jeopardizing our federal funding. If you look at the plans for before and after the gas station, you're going to see, yes, it's a larger gas station, but how much larger is it? I believe the old plan had 19 parking spots. The new plan has about 23. The old plan has relatively 6 gas pumps. The new plan has 7. So we're going to be allowing the demolition of this structure for a few parking spaces and a gas pump. I ask you to sincerely think about the integrity of the street as a whole. The street is showing Bardstown through time, and the Dobbs house being a very important part of that story.
Could you reference that exhibit?
Exhibit.
Yeah, that's got to be submitted to us for the record.
This is Exhibit
1.
No, it's Exhibit F.
F.
Oh, because you've already got other
Yeah.
exhibits, okay.
Know that up.
I would love that. Thank you. And this is what you're going to be allowing.
Exhibit G.
Exhibit G. A hole. A very large hole in our history, a large hole in our story, and it's something we are never going to get back again. This is something I'm urging you not to allow, and this is the effect the demolition is going to have. The Dobbs house is an extremely important part of our history and part of our community and part of our story. Please don't take that away from us. Thank you. That's,
Now let us know who's coming after you.
Or you want me?
Do I ask her,
And you can ask me, and I'll synthesize. I'll straighten it up for you.
can I ask questions contemporaneously with her presentation?
Yes.
Okay. And I'd like to do so.
Yep. Well, you're supposed to direct them through me, but do you have multiples?
I think so.
All right. Shoot.
You knew the answer to that.
do you want me to remain up here?
Yes.
Now, if I understood correctly, you referred, is this property listed on the National Register?
Yes, sir.
It's not listed, is it? It's identified as contributing, isn't it?
That is being listed on the National Register, yes,
It's
sir.
not a listed National Register property.
It
It's
qualifies,
identified as contributing, and there is a distinction, isn't there?
a minute distinction. It is part of our entire district, but it is also contributing on its own right.
What are you basing your analysis or a representation that it's a minor distinction? I mean, one requires the owner's permission to achieve that status, does it not?
Yes,
Okay, do you have the owner's permission to list this on the National Register?
it was listed by the Dobbs family.
It was identified as contributing, it wasn't listed, and you can't list it without getting the owner's permission, is that correct?
It was listed in 2010.
You say listed, it's identified as contributing.
How about this? Rashay, there's a difference between contributing structure and a,
Listed.
tell us the difference between the two designations briefly, please.
You can be part of the whole district. Non-contributing means you are not worthy of having that status. Contributing, in which this house is, meaning that it is significant on its own right, but is included as the larger part of our district. We have over 485 structures in this district. We have a large one. That doesn't take away the significance from this structure. It
Okay.
is listed as
Hold on.
contributing.
You're getting away from what I'm saying, asking. Isn't there another status, which I think is what Jim's getting at? There's another status, and God help me, I can't remember what it is, but there is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. There's the higher status, right? This is in the district and it's contributing, but isn't there a status above that?
No,
No?
no,
Okay,
there is
so,
not.
okay.
It can be defined on particularly how it's listed, part of the district, or individually if it does not fit within the district. This house so happens to fit within the parameters of our district, but it meets those requirements on its own right.
Okay, is the Talbot Tavern listed or contributing?
The Talbot Tavern is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and it is listed as a contributing structure, as
Okay.
part of our district.
But there is a distinction, they're not the same. Is that correct?
They are equally important.
In your opinion, I'm asking about what the regulations say. There is a distinction between listed and not listed, but contributing.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Willett, I'm trying to make sure I understand this completely. It's the same process to be listed through a district as it is individually. You go through the same process, the same procedure, the same paperwork, the same discussion. It takes the same process to nominate both. And that meaning that you have to qualify individually as significant.
Is there a distinction between Talbot Tavern and this building in terms of its
No.
status?
There is not.
It's exactly the same status?
They are considered equal. Yes.
Well, not considered equal, is there a difference between their statuses? Do they have a different status?
No.
And this is important because if this is not clear, this may be a flaw if this goes to court. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so, there's not, okay, keep going. And Jim, try to make these brief if you can, please.
Will do. You're not seriously equating this house and its history with that of the Talbot Tavern?
Yes, I am.
What stories or what specifically about this house is anywhere close to the history that pertains to either Spalding Hall or the tavern?
The fact that this process for nomination and evaluation of all of those properties were equally the same. So they all qualified in Washington, D.C. through a panel of experts as being worthy of preservation.
It was a district that was approved, right?
with each property listed individually in that district. So each property has a number in that district which is accepted as a whole, but each property has to be contributing or non-contributing.
What specifically about this house is unique?
The architecture, the way it was designed, the era in which it was built, and how that contributes to the story of our entire community.
And how many of those examples of that type of architecture exist in this community?
I would say less than 5, specifically that one. And this one has a very unique architecture. It was built during the Depression, and the interior of the house actually was modified so that the front of the house could basically be a business while the individual could live in the rear of the house because of the Depression, of course. So they actually designed it to be an income-producing property and to save the homeowner money.
But it never was, as long as the Dobbs owned it, utilized it as a business property.
You're right. They were fortunate enough they didn't have to go to those circumstances.
So what is the significance of the picture of the Dobbs store to this particular property, other than they just owned it as well?
It's a significant business within our community, which is also a qualification for being on the National Register.
But it has no connection to this particular house.
Prominent business owners of individuals within the community that own businesses within our downtown are qualifiable to be on the National Register of Historic Places.
What economic analysis have you performed with respect to this property?
Economic analysis in the material that you have provided.
No, I'm asking not what I did, what you've done.
Your job is to provide that to me. I do not go out and assess this on my own.
But you expressed an opinion as to its ability to be used. I want to know what the basis for that opinion is.
The basis of that opinion is that we are one of the very few downtowns in the nation in which our Main Street downtown area is fully occupied, minus maybe one property. That is so rare. Bardstown's economic development is booming, and with this property being so close to the downtown main area, I feel that it could be potentially used, and that it has been potentially used as a business before.
With all due respect, you didn't answer the question. Have you specifically performed any economic analysis?
No, sir, because it's your job to provide those figures to me in the analysis.
Thank you.
Yep.
We need to identify who's
Who's coming next? Mr. Penn.
All right, I'll try to keep this brief. In 2017 will be the 50th anniversary of the establishment by the City Council of our historic district and our preservation program. It's the oldest program in Kentucky and one of the first ones in the nation. How ironic it is that this event was caused by the construction of a new post office at the expense of a historic building. The proposal before you is to expand the business at the expense of another historic building. Since 1967, Bardstown has seen many benefits of historic preservation. We have 246 buildings that are listed on the National Register, and yes, they are listed on the National Register just like they were if they were researched and applied for individually. And this includes the Dobbs House. In 2012, Bardstown was designated the most beautiful small town in America, and we have a historic character in town, second to none, that draws thousands of tourists every year and is an important part of our economy. The historic Dobbs House was built in 1938, 1939. At the HRB hearing last September, Mr. Willett testified that the Dobbs House is really not of any unique historical significance to the community, that there are many other examples of this type of construction, and that it detracts from the older buildings adjacent to it to the west. And we heard some of that same type of opinion this evening. These misconceptions place historic properties at great risk. A common belief is that historic means the grand older buildings, such as the Talbot Tower, my old Kentucky home, or the Gohegan Law Office that's next door to the Dobbs House. This can easily lead to the idea that others not so grand may be expendable. The Dobbs House is historic. Richet has pointed out much of that. It's an excellent example of the bungalow style of architecture that was popular in Bardstown in the 1930s. Its distinctive architecture and layout that Richet described so impressed Dobbs's business partner that he had its twin built, and it's located on West Stephen Foster, right next to Bethlehem High School. On August 24, 2010, the City Council unanimously approved the National Register application for the Dobbs House and others with it. This application is about the demolition of a historic building in good usable condition, located right in the heart of downtown, a highly visible area heavily traveled by residents and tourists. The HRB denied this application because demolition of this historic building does not comply with regulations that include the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation, and in particular Article 15.7, which Mr. Willett referred to, of the zoning regulations, which in the case of an application for demolition of a building, states that the HRB must consider a claim of economic hardship. Section 8, which you have and was referred to earlier, which you have as an exhibit of the Bardstown Historic Design Review Manual, expands upon Article 15.7 by covering in detail the procedure and documentation necessary to claim an exemption from preservation standards based upon economic hardship. Economic hardship in the case of this income-producing property means that the denial of Newcomb Oil Company's application to demolish the Dobbs House deprives the company of any reasonable rate of return. The applicant must provide clear and convincing evidence that the existing building is not capable of providing any reasonable rate of return, that efforts to sell or lease, his bona fide efforts to sell the lease or lease the property have been unsuccessful, and that rehabilitation costs prevent any reasonable return on the investment. The burden of proof is on the property owner. Specific detailed requirements for submitting a documented claim of economic hardship, as was discussed a short time ago, are found on page 116 of Section 8. The only documentation that we received at our hearing, which was September 20, included a letter from the applicant containing general statements with no supporting documentation. Oral testimony given by Mr. Willett at the HRB hearing regarding the PVA assessment, the fact that the property produced no income, that the annual expenses were $3,000 to $4,000, there was no debt, and there was zero cash flow. We received no other supporting evidence, documentation other than a copy of the deed. The required documentation that we did not receive at the hearing includes real estate taxes, any and all appraisals, all listings for sale or rent in the last 2 years, prices asked and offers received, profitable and adaptive reuses, tax returns, estimated cost of demolition, estimated current market value after demolition, report from a licensed engineer or an architect regarding the condition of the structure, identification of alternative uses, cost estimates of rehabilitation for reasonable uses of the property, projection of revenue and expenses for use or reuse, including federal tax credits and more. The applicant made a number of claims at the hearing. First, that since 1998, it has tried extensively to identify productive residential and commercial use without much success. No data was submitted to support this very general statement. Second, that efforts since 2010 to find uses for the house have been unsuccessful and have resulted in no income. Again, no data was submitted as to when this occurred or what efforts were made. Third, that internal mechanical systems would require replacement for any use, and that this expense is not justified until a use is identified. No cost estimates were submitted to us, and no mention was made at that time of any consideration of federal or state tax credits for National Register properties. And last, the documentation required by Section 8 is not appropriate because much of it depends on income generated, and there has been none. This begs the question, in my mind, of why there is no income. So Which comes first? Do you invest and wait for the market to come, or do you advertise aggressively and find yourself a tenant or a buyer? Now this evening, we have all been given a huge file of financial data, which we were not privy to either in 2010, when this came up before, or certainly in September, when it was requested. So we can go over that. I've looked at it briefly. Briefly, a number of the things that I just mentioned that we did not receive are in here. But what's missing? Number one, there is no data showing aggressive uses, even how many times since 2010 or in the last 2 years has Newcomb Oil Company tried to market the property, who have they marketed it to? You know, there is nothing there about any efforts to find a use for it. We have all the financial data that has been submitted about the rehab costs and so forth, what might be charged for rent. But what's missing is no attempt, a bona fide attempt that's required to find a use, find a willing seller, or a buyer rather, or a willing person to lease the property. And I think it also speaks from what I heard of the listing in the material submitted of a very unimaginative list of possible uses for that property. You could probably immediately rule out somebody wanting to rent it as a family. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. But there are a lot of other things in between residential use and commercial use. And there's no indication that that has been aggressively followed. So because of the lack of specific supporting documentation, the applicant has failed to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that the existing building is not capable of providing any reasonable rate of return, and therefore has failed to prove its claim of economic hardship. Since this claim is not proved, I feel it must be denied. If you overturn this denial by the HRB, you will take a giant step backwards and set a dangerous precedent by allowing the demolition based on limited evidence of a usable historic building in order to allow for commercial expansion. Only 6 years ago, City Council unanimously approved the application to place this building on the National Register. And I urge the City Council to continue its strong support of our half-century preservation program that has so benefited our community, and do the right thing to protect the historic character of Bardstown by denying the Newcomb Oil Company's appeal of its application to demolish the Dobbs House. Mr. Willett at our hearing made the comment that the demolition of the Dobbs House was not like killing the last dodo bird. No, the Newcomb Oil Company is not killing the last dodo bird, but the demolition of historic buildings, one by one, is the sure road to extinction. We want to keep the Dobbs House and the other 245 dodo birds. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, you got about, there's about 12 minutes left, so keep that in mind.
Use my dinner.
Please identify yourself, ma'am.
Do you want my title or my name?
Oh,
I'm the hysterical historian who's here to talk a little about history. And my name is Dixie Hibbs. And I have a very short version, so I was told I only had 2 minutes. First of all, over a period of 80 years, the block of East Stephen Foster has been stripped of 5 of its early buildings, dating back to the 1800s. Now, only 3 brick buildings remain of what is completed frontage. It's ironic that the automobile, which brings visitors to our community, has contributed to the loss of many of our corner structures. Starting in the 1920s, oldest brick house in Bardstown was taken down to build a service station on the corner of Bashir and 3rd Street. Automobile agencies and service stations were built at the intersections because that was economically feasible, and you always want a corner when you have a service station. Realizing that the opening at the end of the blocks, once the service station's closed, are like missing teeth. You've got a nice lock in each corner, your teeth are gone. Now we are building back those openings. We have replaced the service stations with newer buildings. And they were designed to fit into the neighborhood, into the historic atmosphere we have. Now we're being asked to accept another removal. Since Bardstown has many buildings older and of more historic value than this 1939 house, you may not realize it serves an important purpose in this block. The street once had 8 structures that fronted Stephen Foster, now only 3. A parking lot and the 5-star gas station are open areas at each end of the block. The growth of the town over years has continued to use up the residential spaces, but we realize that these buildings play an important role in the streetscapes up and down our streets. Since this hearing doesn't address the design of the new building, but only the need to demolish the older one, it becomes difficult to argue against an unknown final result, except the proposed layout that was shown of the gas pumps, parking spaces, and the building with the Dobbs house removed with the tanks to be put under it. It allows us to question the gain to the business of 3 to 5 more parking spaces, 2 more pumps with the loss of a substantial part of our street scenery. The paving of the house lot will display another open space, like a parking lot. Not noted for parking on the layout, the tanks are proposed to be put under that area. There are many things that can be said about the successful efforts of the Bardstown preservationists. Since 1966, many people have worked and invested their money. And anyone in this room that owns an older house built before 1940 knows it's expensive. It's not a brand new house, but the charm, the character, and the pleasure of living in one, you pay the bill. And any time that you're going to deal with a house, whether it's new or old, you have maintenance and you have costs. But I want to say now, it's ironic that the success of our preservationists to bring people here to Bardstown, the most beautiful small town in America, has brought many visitors and enhanced our economy. But now, that success is driving this action of expanding the 5-star, which will take down one of those historic buildings. They bought gas for their vehicles, and now it's driving the removal of one of those historic buildings they've come to view. Mr. Willett said that this is one of the main entrances into Bardstown. It came to mind, do you really want this second block coming from the east up into Bardstown to look like a wide smile with 2 straggly teeth hanging down? Because that's what those 2 brick buildings will look like when you enlarge the 5-star and you have the parking lot on the other end. I know it's difficult in business to make those decisions. Sometimes you just have to say, I will save part of it, use part of it. It's my knowledge that the back part of this lot has been used since it was bought for the business. So the prices and things that were quoted, the purchase price, if you took 1/3 of that as the value of the back of the lot, they've been using that for parking since the beginning. So it's very difficult. I can argue both sides. I could argue take it down, build a replica or a smaller one in the front. But the reality is, if you start taking them down, you can always find a reason to take them down. It's a lot harder. Flagey Hall was going to be taken down. $8,000 was what Flagey Hall had been quoted to tear it down. And the Archdiocese wouldn't pay it. $8,000 stood between tearing Flagey Hall down and leaving it where now the Archdiocese, the parish, and many people use it. It is economic, but sometimes you have to step back and look at it again. What else can I do with this project? And I know over 2 minutes.
7 minutes. Oh man, it takes him 7 minutes to say his name.
For once in my life, I think I'll be pretty brief. I plan to be.
State your name, mister.
You won't believe it. I know you won't. We've been here before, any number of times, on the same general question. This is just the latest, and this time it is to the point of asking the City Council to overturn the rightful action of the Historic Review Board. It's obvious from what's been asked tonight that there is really not a grasp or understanding of what contributing elements in the National Register District is all about. When the NR District was created, we had a number of buildings in Bardstown, like the Talbot Tavern, which had already been put on the National Register individually. Old Kentucky Home, Cathedral, Wickland, Talbot Tavern. The NR District takes in many blocks, and the rules are how many elements in that block qualify as contributing. Now, our number of contributing elements is going up every year. The minimum is 50 years old. We've got a lot of other neighborhoods that in the immediate future can be put on the National Register because they have all kinds of houses built before 1945, 50, now over 50 years old, who will be considered qualified for contributing elements in the National Register District, which would be expanded. This house is a perfect example because 5 Star, as it exists, was already built when the Dobbs heirs needed to sell it. Their major concern immediately was that they did not want the house to be destroyed, and they discussed that both with me as preservation coordinator and with Newcomb Oil Company.
Object to
approached to buy it.
hearsay. I mean, this is going far afield.
Yeah,
What his conversations
Let me
with
finish
the
what
Dobbs
has
are.
happened here, please. All I'm trying to say is
We'll wait
this
for
was
what it's worth.
discussed when the property was purchased. The main point here is that Newcomb Oil Company has used 60% of the area to support, increase, improve, expand 5 Star operation. It was able to add to the existing building twice and had a great increase in parking because they had the Cordell Dobbs property. That's been used for years now. It does not change the status of the Cordell Dobbs house. It's contributing by National Register standards in the National Register District of Bardstown. There's a really beautiful solution here, and I urge tonight Newcomb Oil Company to consider that, to look at that. They have the restoration tax credits that they can use on the Cordell Dobbs house and restore it and rejuvenate it. I would suggest, because the contribution they have made to their hometown, how important it is that they create a monument to Newcomb Oil Company and its history. This lot they're on, that they're working with here, talking about expanding this 5 Star. They've been on that property for 50 years. It was all residential when they arrived in the 1950s. This would be the 4th house in that quarter block that would be lost in their expansions. And it is a perfect example for them to embrace and pursue for our historic community as an example of the contribution they can make and to shine a light on their amazing company, what they've achieved. It's really remarkable, and it should have exposure. They'd also create another thing for visitors to enjoy when they come to historic Bardstown and fill up at the 5 Star. What they have put out on plans, they do not have to have that space occupied by the historic house to still expand and do whatever their final plans are. But look at that, because it is a monumental project that you alone can do, and it would just really be a shining light for Newcomb Oil Company. Thank you all.
And that was David Hall, in case you know, he never did say his name. I recognize him. Rashay, you have anybody else? How much time did they have?
They have 1 minute left
1 minute?
of the 30.
You want to seize that 1 minute and let's go on to our summation here.
Yes, sir.
And just so that for the council's benefit, again, what we're going to do is we're going to allow Mr. Willett to give a summary rebut, and then we'll let Rashay summarize and rebut in hers, and then we'll close this hearing and you all can deliberate, or at that point you can ask questions before we close the hearing. Jim?
Is there a time limit on
Yep, 5 minutes.
just one check?
I would be significantly shorter than 5 minutes. This can be summarized very succinctly. There is, within our ordinances, a mandatory analysis that has to be done by the Historic Review Board and now by the City Council. This is a hearing de novo, so they've produced a lot of evidence that we haven't seen before, as we have as well. We think that the evidence that we produced responds in every material respect to the requirements set forth within the ordinances, within their own guidelines, and within the applicable state and federal rules, regulations applicable to this. With all due respect, they have overstated, in my view, the historic significance. Yes, it is of significance architecturally, but there are other examples, and Mr. Hall previously testified as to the location and the number of those at the HRB hearing level. But the key thing that you must keep your eye on is you have a standard of review. It's set forth on the first page of that packet. Does the evidence show that there is any reasonable return on the investment that Newcomb Oil has made in that property? Using the analysis dictated by their own regulations, the answer to that by the numbers is clearly no. And we think under those circumstances, the decision is constrained to approving the application of Newcomb Oil to permit this project to proceed. That's
Any final questions for Mr. Willett? Council? Thank you. Rashay, Tag, you
So I want to start off with the fact that we really want Newcomb Oil to be successful. You all are important members of the community, and we value you and your business. We really value your family. But we have rules we have to follow too. Rules that allow for federal funding for our entire community to continue. And we want to help the community just like you do. But those rules say that what structures remain in the historic district we are obligated to protect. And we're obligated to preserve them. And that's exactly what we're trying to do tonight. I'm also trying to help the Newcombs in the fact that we in the HRB allowed you to demolish the existing store and rebuild. We're not opposing that. We want you to be successful. But there has to be a way that you can expand that store and be prosperous but without tearing down this historic house. That's what we're asking for. We're asking for you to grow and be successful without hurting our story. The story of our community in which the Dobbs House plays a very important part of. And please remember, and Mr. Willett pointed this out very well, yes, there is a checklist of economic hardship. It is required to meet all of those requirements. All of them. They have not been met. Remember what I said, regret only goes one way. Once the house is gone, we are never going to get that back. We're never going to get that streetscape back. But you don't even have to take that from me. You don't have to trust me and my love of preservation and my love of this community. You have letters from top experts in Frankfurt, the top experts in Frankfurt, urging you not to allow this to happen. The consequences of this decision are large and they impact a lot of things. There are precedents that will be set. There is funding that will potentially be halted. Please think about the Dobbs House, our story of Bardstown, and you're going to see if you do that you can't tell the story of Bardstown without that house remaining. Thank you all.
Rashay, I had a couple of questions.
Absolutely.
You said a couple things. Is there something specific that you wanted to highlight when you said they haven't met those criteria? Is there something specific you wanted to highlight in terms of what they haven't complied with?
You have to fully disclose and make sure that there are examples in which you try to promote and basically promote and allow the property to be rented, to be purchased, and for it to be advertised. So those are three key requirements within economic hardship, stating that you have at least followed those avenues, and that has not been proven here.
Okay, and then the one thing that I'm confused a little bit about here. I don't know how the state works. There's criteria for economic hardship and demolition, but is there? And so I think the answer to this is that if the criteria, you're saying the criteria haven't been met, but if the criteria were met, then demolition is appropriate.
Yes.
Okay. And if the criteria is met, that criteria is state criteria in part. And so if the criteria is met, the state wouldn't withdraw their funding if we met the standards that they have.
Yes.
They wouldn't withdraw.
Yes.
Because I just don't, that sounds a little bit like a threat. And,
No, it's not.
And you're just saying, I think what you're saying, I may be not saying it correctly, but is that there's criteria, you don't believe the criteria have been met. If the criteria have been met, then we are on firm footing.
Absolutely. Can I
Okay.
restate that really quick, Tim? Am I
Sure,
allowed to do
please,
that?
yes, if, because I've misstated it for you. I asked you a question, answered it for you, so
No,
go ahead.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. Basically, I'm trying to say this. We have HRB federal regulations in which we impose. And each time that we do not abide by those regulations, one of those, which is to preserve what's remaining in our historic district, we become technically on probation. We're evaluated by the state and the National Park Service. If we continue to allow that to happen, that potentially will put our funding at risk. I hope I answered that.
Yes, ma'am, you did.
That was, yes.
Any other questions for Rashay? If not, I'll close the public hearing. And at this point now, you all may deliberate and make a decision. You may deliberate, make a decision at your next meeting, or consider this information and make a decision at your next meeting. It's up to you all. What you would like to do.
Well, I'll go first,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman. I see our job as reviewing the decision or the recommendation of the Historic Review Board. That's what we're here for. Their recommendation was based on, mainly, that the information was not provided. This information in Chapter 8, these 25 things, which we have received here. So we got this here. So it wasn't provided in the HRB meeting, so they didn't have a chance to review it. Certainly, we don't have a chance to review it, because there's no way we can review this. We've been listening, so we can't review this to make a decision. Nor, quite frankly, do I wish to review it and make a decision prior to the HRB looking at it. It's not fair to them or to us for them to not get this information. They're the ones trained in historic preservation. They understand what the requirements are. They've been to classes, they understand all this. To deny them the chance to review this and make their recommendation, we're circumventing the process. So my recommendation is that we uphold the recommendation of the HRB, which they made because they didn't have the information, and invite the applicant to reapply through HRB with this information and let the process go through like it's supposed to. That's what I would like to do.
I think that procedurally, if you wanted to do that, you might want to refer it back to them.
If we can do that, then would be.
I think that would be,
Yeah,
it's a fine
if we can
point,
do
but
that.
if you deny it with the information, okay, then you've decided that this information is not
Absolutely,
sufficient.
that's what I would really like to do, is just let them take their cut at it. Because they were, much of, if you read all the minutes, much of the discussion is, we don't have this information. The regulations require this information very specifically. And they didn't get it, so they said, well, we deny it. Let's give them the chance to do that. So if we can make that, then that's the motion I would make, is to refer it back to them. I'm not making that motion yet. I'll wait for the rest of the discussion. But
Well, I think they deserve the time to get the information.
yeah,
I agree with that.
Would you, if you refer it back to them, would you be referring it back to them to consider what we've heard tonight, or to allow them and/or the applicant to supplement the record yet?
I would suggest they take a fresh cut at it. I mean, that they can have supplemental information, because as Jim pointed out, there's some things, he presented some things that the others hadn't seen, they presented some things he hadn't
Yes.
seen.
Yes.
Let them.
And by the way, when he said trial de novo, that means a new trial, new information. And so, yes, that happens.
So that would allow them to prepare their questions regarding the information they've received here, and that would just.
There's nothing in the rules or requirements that would prohibit that?
It would let the process go through the way it's supposed to go. Rather than putting the burden on us to review this in 5 minutes and make a decision on it, I'm just, so if, I'll make a motion then that we refer this application back to the Historic Review Board to review, including all the information we received tonight.
And to allow both parties to
And
supplement
to allow both parties to supplement as
or
they see
accept
fit.
it as it is?
Yes.
I'll second it.
Now, further discussion. Call for the vote. All those in favor of that motion? All right. And I would hope that the HRB would expedite that, because I know that this has been lingering, so.
Should we make a motion to, within a certain amount of time, or just, because we have an obligation within 45 days, once a hearing comes to us.
Can you all hear it and come back to us within 45 days from tonight?
We'd have to call a special meeting.
Yes?
I don't think it's fair that the onus is on the HRB to have to act so quickly when this data was available in September, but it was not presented to us. So I don't really feel badly that it might delay their application. I would like to act as chair of the board as quickly as we can. So if we have
Well,
to,
understand, we would want to take action within 45 days. And I think we will take action
But
within 45
haven't we
days.
just taken action?
You haven't denied it or approved it?
Yeah, having denied or approved, you just referred it back, you sent it back. So you have to make there has to be a final decision, a final appealable decision. And this isn't a final appealable decision. But I think you should be able, 45 days from today would put you into mid-January.
So it's not cleaner than just to deny it and then start all over? And then the 45 days doesn't?
My problem with denial is that if you deny it with this as the record, and then they come back with the same record,
Okay.
if you overturn that might be the very definition of arbitrary.
But if we do deny, their only recourse is to go to
Circuit court,
Circuit
yes.
court. They don't get to bring it back.
Well, they could reapply with new information. Right. I understand.
Okay.
Yes, and that's why I was asking about the supplementing the record. I wanted to. But you've got a motion that's passed, and again, Barbie, we should put it back on our agenda just so that the HRB knows, if you all haven't taken it up, it'll be back on our agenda for final action, and that may or may not be good news for you all. I think you all would want to take it up. That would be my recommendation to you.
Need a motion to adjourn?
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Second?
Second. Somebody gonna second the motion to adjourn?
Second.